Welcome to the live stream on a Thursday night in Spain. Good to be here. Hope all is good with you wherever you are in the world. All these slightly sort of dodgy early moments, just making sure that everything's working. I think it is, seems to be. My YouTube channel here is telling me that I'm not live, but anyway, I'm just going to go back and check again to make sure that it is. Better to get all this over with now, isn't it, than faff around with it later on. And I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, here we go. It's all there. Good. So welcome again. If my beginning was missed, welcome again to the live stream. Thursday night. We were live yesterday, and here we are again in the evening now. So hopefully we're catching different parts of the world by coming out at different times. This is probably better for Europe and probably North America as well. But if you're watching from, well, watching from Australia, New Zealand, anywhere in that area, Australasia, welcome to, of course. Italian Grand Prix, Monza, always a huge weekend. Looking forward to that very much. Got so many memories of that circuit. One of the first Grand Prix I went to as a young journalist, actually, 72. I went to about 4 that year, and that was one of them. Stayed in a hotel called the Celide in a little town called Desio, not far from Monza, not very well known, but absolutely great. Lovely town square, big church, big cathedral, everything you'd want from an Italian town. And I got into there because Goodyear used to stay there, and they very kindly allotted one of their rooms to me. And for many years I enjoyed hanging out with the Goodyear guys. And then the Renault, in the days of the Renault Turbo with Alain Prost, Eddie Cheever, René Arnoux, that era, Marie-Claude Beaumont, Gérard Larousse, they used to stay there as well, same hotel, and we used to have a lot of fun in those days there. Indeed, it was, just rambling now, absolutely incoherently, Leo Mell of Goodyear, who was the head of Goodyear at that point, early 70s, put me on to, is the first guy to recommend that I read a novel by Herman Wouk. He was reading War and Remembrance at that point. And whenever I see War and Remembrance these days, I always think of Leo Mell, and what a great bit of advice that was, and what a wonderful writer Herman Wouk is. So, Italian Grand Prix, impressed to see that Ferrari are going to be appearing in livery based on the 1975 312T, which was the car that took Niki Lauda to the championship victory that year. A beautiful transverse gearbox car designed by Mauro Foghieri. It was a bit of a gamble whether to go to a transverse gearbox or not. In those days, it was brilliant. It was before the aero days, so it was all about weight distribution, polar moment of inertia, and drivability, and the torque of that flat 12 Ferrari engine as well was a huge advantage. Nobody worried about how wide it was. Aero, as I say, wasn't an issue. And he did this transverse gearbox, and it was just brilliant. It was just perfect for the weight distribution Ferrari wanted, for the polar moment that Ferrari needed. And both Niki and Clay Regazzoni just outstandingly good in 75. And Niki clinched the championship at Monza, which is always a big thing for Ferrari, isn't it? To clinch a championship at Monza. I guess the last time they would have done that prior to that would have been 61, but it was very damped, of course, dampened by the loss of Taffy von Trips that day, and it was not a day for celebration. But 75, Ferrari were just brilliant. Niki was on the pole and finished third, which is all he had to do to clinch the Drivers' Championship. Emerson was a very strong second in the Marlboro McLaren M23. It's a new chassis, I think, for that race, from memory. And I remember Niki arriving at the track on qualifying. I didn't see him on race day in qualifying. I remember him riding in on a Bonelli 6-cylinder, I think it was 6-cylinder, wasn't it? 750 Bonelli, unbelievable bikes that they used to make back then. I don't know if Bonelli's still in business. I think they probably are, owned by the Chinese or something. But Niki on a bike that big was impressive. You know, this was the future world champion riding into the paddock at Monza in the days when the paddock was in that lovely cobblestone area behind the pits. And Clay, of course, Clay Regazzoni won the race, his second win at Monza. I can imagine what the crowd was like after that race. It just absolutely swarmed the finishing straight, the pit straight there. Clay was the winner. Niki had clinched the championship. Ferrari were constructors champions, of course. And what a day. Just thinking about Clay, actually, he doesn't get much of a mention in the Ferrari press release. It's all Nicky winning that championship. But Clay, when you think about Clay Regazzoni, a very underrated driver, and what a character, what a great guy as well. And 1970, his first year in Formula One, he and Ignazio Giunti were both given opportunities. And interestingly, both of them finished fourth in their first race, which happened to be for Ferrari. Giunti at Spa, Clay at Zandvoort. And then Clay went on to finish second in, I'm guessing it was Austria, and then won the Italian Grand Prix in 1970. So in the space of 8 races, he had something like 2 fourths, 2 seconds, and a win. So Isaac Hadjar, absolutely nothing. Today's drivers have it completely differently, of course. But when you think about Clay Regazzoni's first season in Formula One, well, it doesn't end there, actually, because he had the win, those 2 good second places, 2 good fourth places, and simultaneously, he was still driving in Formula 2, and he won the Formula 2 championship. So think about that. That's Clay Regazzoni. That's how good he was, driving the beautiful little Techno Formula 2 car. He won that championship in 70, and he won his first Grand Prix in 70 at Monza. At Monza, in a Ferrari. And yes, he was Swiss, but lots of Ferrari fans used to call him Swiss-Italian because he was right on the border at Lugano, and he was an absolute hero. He was the epitome of a Ferrari Formula One driver, really. Just superb. And I saw him drive many times, BRM and also Ferrari. And he was just what you'd expect a racing driver to be. So let's hear it for Clay Regazzoni. It's brilliant. Actually, he also won 2, he went on to win other races, of course, but he won 2 non-championship races. The Race of Champions in 71 in that beautiful wedge-shaped Ferrari 312B. And here is the race program from the Race of Champions, 1971, signed by the winner, Clay Regazzoni. Beautiful Dexter Brown artwork there. Look at that, beautiful. He got it almost right, didn't he? He's got John Surtees there leading Clay. Jackie Stewart led a lot of the race, but then Clay won it convincingly. So very, very good win for Clay. And he also won the 75 Swiss Grand Prix, would you believe? A funny race held at Dijon in France, because the racing as today not allowed in Switzerland. But the Swiss staged their Grand Prix at Dijon, non-championship race. Wasn't particularly well supported, but Clay won that as well. Of course, he also went on to win Williams' first ever Grand Prix, 1979 British Grand Prix at Silverstone. So Clay Regazzoni. There'll be a lot of talk about Nicky, I think, in the Ferrari context this weekend, that 75 championship. But let's also remember how good Clay was and the role he played in the Constructors' Championship that year. And I gather that this weekend the Ferraris are going to be sort of exactly the same tone of red, which is good. They're going to have some of the stripes from the 75 car. The font for the drivers' names is going to be in that lovely script that they had. And I think on race day, the mechanics and the drivers are going to be in different outfits as well, something near 75. So good on Ferrari for doing that. Excellent. Why not? They did win the championship that year. Big deal for them, of course. And it was a big deal for Luca Montezemolo, who'd taken the team into a new path with Nicky in 74, and then it all came to fruition in 75. And a big deal for Mauro Foghieri, as I say, to do that. He did the complete car, and he then did that transverse gearbox as well. And what a beautiful package that was, mechanically speaking. Anyway, here we are. Let's get on with it. Some questions and comments as we go into the Italian Grand Prix. Let's have a look and see what's going on. Hey, Peter, this is from Aaron Lee, one of our regulars. Hey, Aaron, how you doing? Hey, Peter, is there ever any radio communication during a qualifying lap? Perhaps if it's changeable conditions, or is any amount of radio too distracting on a hot lap? Well, of course, they can talk to the drivers on a hot qualifying lap, but they tend not to, because obviously the driver's very focused, and the last thing he needs is the radio crackling in his ear. Not that it crackles very much these days, just loud noise. And it is pretty loud. I mean, they can't hear the engine note of the car in front because of the radio headset they've got, and obviously the sound insulation as well. So it's they're hearing everything pretty clearly. So you'd tend not to want to talk to them during a qualifying lap. Obviously, if there's something like a red, or there's a shunt, or there's some oil or something going down, you'd have to get on, and the driver would have to be ready for that. But in general, they'd stay away from it. Some drivers are a lot more sensitive to that than others, I think. I mean, Nigel hated being spoken to unless he was on the straight. And back in those days, it was quite difficult to know exactly where he was on the circuit anyway. So we had plenty of shouting matches with Nigel. Well, him shouting at us, actually, not. And these days, you get quite a lot of, Charles Leclerc, don't talk to me. I know I'm quick. I know how quickly I've got to go. And a lot of them say that, don't they? The engineers love to get on and say, let's have some pace now. And they go, well, what do you think I'm trying to do? I'm going as fast as I can. Yeah, lots of that stuff, and quite good. Right, next one. Sarosh Soman, another regular. Hey, Sarosh. Hi, Peter. What kind of drivers would the Windsor Formula One team have? 2 short corner drivers like Max, Leclerc, Hadjar, Max, or Leclerc, Sainz, which 2 extremes? No, I'd have one of each. And that's why I always say it was such a shame to break up that Ferrari combination of Leclerc, Sainz, because it was a perfect combination in terms of the 2 extremes that those 2 drivers with their styles would want from the car. And I wonder, in reality, whether one of the reasons they're not going as well now is because they don't have a Carlos Sainz out there going to that extreme of the wide entry. I know Lewis is there, but he's a bit sort of trying to be, he's got a foot in both camps, hasn't he? And that's one of the problems he's got. But that was a classic example of a great combination. I think Mario Ronnie was a good one. Nelson Piquet, Nigel Mansell, very good. Senna Prost, equally very good. So yeah, you'd want 2 extremes rather than 2 drivers both going down the same tunnel. Good question. Thank you. Another one from Sarosh. Hi, Peter. I only want wet races since DRS won't be allowed. For example, the battle between Max and Leclerc was pure and enjoyable at Spa. Give a fair chance for the driver to defend, which is an art in itself. Yeah, defense is a great art. And it used to be that passing back markers was also, or positioning back markers in a way that they held up the car that was behind you, was in an artistic way, not in an aggressive way, was one of the great things as well. And that's been taken away basically by impeding regulations and GPS, so that's gone. And then defense was always a very good thing. And the famous Alonso defense of the attack of Michael and Alonso in Imola when Fernando won. I mean, that was just all classic cat and mouse. And because today, I don't know if it's a TV director or Liberty or Formula One or the fans, the pressure from the fans, everybody's so thirsty for overtakes that we're just getting all these gratuitous overtakes that actually mean nothing. DRS overtakes, pit lane strategy overtakes, if all else fails. Safety car, let's see if that shakes things out. We'll just put it out for no reason almost. All these things have taken away a lot of the subtlety of great Grand Prix driving. And defense, always as important and always as spectacular in my opinion as overtaking. And I totally agree with you there. And DRS is one of the bad things we've had for a long time now. Amab Das, don't understand why people call Oscar boring, do they? I don't. Who would call Oscar Piastri boring? I can't even imagine. If they are, they're not watching the race. That's all I can say. He has a very good sense of humour. He's extremely intelligent. He's also a very good racing driver, which is why he's not boring. Would be very surprised if he doesn't win this year's championship. Yeah, I think now we can all say we'd be surprised if he doesn't win the championship this year. And judging drivers by their sense of humour, judging drivers by how they talk out of the car, what they do with their spare time is absurd, because it's all about racing and it's all about driving and what you do in the race car. And Oscar is by no means boring in a race car, not by any means at all. And so, yeah, as I say, if people think he's boring, then they're just not watching it, or they're watching too much of the other stuff, which isn't relevant anyway. Probably that. I should take this opportunity to apologise to all Kiwis, New Zealanders, because at the end of the live stream, when was it? On Wednesday, yesterday morning, it was over 2 hours, and I was getting a little bit, I don't know, shell-shocked, could it be? And I suddenly, without thinking, confused Liam Lawson with Oscar, and I suddenly said Liam's an Aussie. Big apologies. Of course, he's not an Aussie. We all know Liam's a Kiwi through and through, but apologies for that. Trying to make sure that won't happen again. But it was somebody saying, I can't remember the name of the person now, but he said, I'm a New Zealander, go Liam. Fair enough, and New Zealand's got a lot of which to be proud now with the whole McLaren success. And there's no way we should ever forget the role played, not only by Bruce, but also Denny and Chris Amon, two other very, very quick New Zealanders. Howden Ganley was also in there right in the early days. And Bruce, of course, was just magnificent. Jez James, Peter, have you seen Income Manx 83 with Ari? It's probably a Manx Rally in that case. Ari in a Opel Manta. If so, may not sound crazy in today's high-tech world, but I'm yet to see a better camera position and sound unless you can suggest otherwise. Well, I haven't seen it, but we're talking about the Manx Rally, which is obviously Isle of Man, which used to be a big rally. And we're talking about Ari Vatanen in an Opel Manta. Wow. Ari Vatanen, one of my heroes, always has been, still is. Great guy, lovely person. And yeah, you don't get to see many. I haven't seen that many onboards of him, actually, so I definitely will look out for that. Thank you very much, Jez, for bringing that to our attention. I think everybody should go and look for that. Manx Rally, 1983, Ari Vatanen onboard. Sounds excellent. Mishrif, hi. Could you give insight as to what Nigel would be doing differently if he was in Lando's shoes? Presume not be giving up wins Hungary and being so polite. What can Lando do differently to unsettle Oscar? That's a good question, isn't it? It's a very good question. I've been thinking about it. I had a good day today, actually. One of the meetings I was supposed to attend was cancelled, hopefully postponed, but anyway, it didn't happen. And I went out in the I-20N Hyundai. There's a beautiful bit of road about an hour from where we live, up in the mountains, billiard smooth surface. It's all hairpins, downhill S's, uphill S's, and no better car for that than the I-20N. Just got a new set of Pirelli Zeros on it too, P0s. It's just wonderful. So I had a great day. Anyway, cruising up and down on the motorway to get to that place, I was thinking about, I wonder if somebody's going to ask about how Lando should approach the rest of the year and what he would do. And sure enough, here we are, Mishrif. You know, there's not a lot more he can do other than the way he's going about it now. I think he's, I heap praise on him after his retirement from the Dutch Grand Prix and the way he handled that. And I think that was absolutely the right way to handle it, because the team, not that the team were never behind him, but if ever they weren't in some little areas, they will be now, because he handled it so well. And there was no blame thrown out. There was no helmet throwing. It was all, we win and lose as a team, to quote the famous Lewis stuff. So that was good. Actually, how to beat Oscar now is, with having had that retirement, is not an easy question to answer. And all I can do is go back to my original thing at the start of the year of just being as focused as he can on his side of the garage. If possible, try to keep as much information close to the chest as possible. And I don't necessarily mean setup. I said I was actually with Cameron, I was saying that Lando was so good on Friday at Zandvoort. And in my opinion, to my eye, a lot of that was through turn 9, what he was doing out of 8 into 9, and the way he was very patient on the throttle through 9, and the way he was using the car through 9. He was just really, really good. And he was always quick, wasn't he? When he went out, he was always slightly quicker than Oscar, always, on Friday. Now, you could say, well, Oscar wasn't trying, he didn't have the setup. But I'd be willing to bet that Oscar's good enough to have picked up on where Lando was so good. And I think Oscar worked pretty hard on that going into Saturday. And I think we saw that in FP3. They were absolutely identical through 8 in FP3 from what I could see on their quickest laps. And then Oscar did that second run on a used set in Q1 just to go a little bit quicker than Lando. And all that is just how good Oscar is at managing his weekend and getting everything sorted at just the right moment. Very impressive to see that. Now, he wasn't as good through 8 in qualifying, through 9 in qualifying, because what we're talking about there is actually patience on the throttle, or just waiting for the right moment for rotation, and that was a sort of corner where both of them were using a short corner technique, because it's a tightening radius corner. Basically everybody was there. And so it was all about subtlety, and both of them in the best 2 cars on the grid. and both of them using them very well. But when it came to qualifying, Oscar wasn't quite as good through there. His adrenaline, maybe, whatever, wouldn't have been pulse rate, but just a little bit more adrenaline, a little bit more aggressive on the throttle, wasn't quite as good. But in the race he was, and I think that's where he got him. So the other thing I would say about Lando, and your question is, how can Lando possibly take it to Oscar now? If he's got a place where he is that good, and it's pretty clear that he's going to be a little bit better than Oscar, maybe out of the box, keep it to himself. Don't show too much of that on a Friday. That requires a lot of confidence from Lando's point of view, A, and B, it requires a lot of understanding of where he's quick anyway. And there are going to be places, of course, where Oscar is better than Lando. So that's quite a difficult ask. But given the amount of time that they've been in the team together and the number of times they've been around all the circuits we're going to, it's not actually that difficult to pinpoint now, I think, where Lando is going to be pretty good compared with Oscar going into a weekend. In fact, if Lando asked me, I would say, well, these corners on these circuits, I'd be able to give him a lift straight away. And I'm sure his engineer can, well, I hope his engineer would be able to do the same thing. But if he's got that little advantage, keep it to yourself. Don't display it too much on a Friday. That would be one way of doing it. That's what Nigel would do. That's what Nigel did against Nelson, for sure. It wasn't just, and that's what Carlos did against Alan Jones. It wasn't just setup. It would be like Carlos knew after the pits at Buenos Aires that the quick way there for him was fourth gear, not third. And yet throughout practice and qualifying, Alan always used third through there. And Carlos only used fourth when he had to, just going into qualifying. He didn't use fourth on a Friday. And he told me that's what he was going to do. You know, oh, that's definitely fourth, but I'm just going to keep it in third for the moment. So you've got to start using some of those tricks. I don't know whether today drivers think that way. They probably don't. Because everything is so visible and everything is so above board, isn't it? But I'm not suggesting anything other than a racing driver keeping his cards a little bit closer to his chest. And let's talk then about Monza, because that's the race this weekend, and what Lando might do at Monza. I mean, I think he might be better through, let me think. I mean, Oscar's going to be very good. First chicane, for sure. Second chicane, for sure, which is basically about accuracy and high-speed braking. I can't see Lando being a lot better. I was going to say the Lesmos, but yeah, I would think he's going to use less energy through the loaded rear and front through the Lesmos than Oscar, I would guess. So it's more of a tire management advantage he might have through the Lesmos. Bear in mind both McLarens last year raced one another into a two-stop strategy, giving the win to Charles Leclerc, who stayed out on a one-stopper. McLaren for sure will be going in this weekend saying, whatever you do, guys, we've got to think about time management. And so there's one area where Lando could potentially have maybe a slight advantage, but not show too much of that on a Friday. And so that would be one area. Ascari chicane, difficult to see. I mean, coming out of the Ascari chicane, very important to stay on the right-hand side while you're accelerating down and then move across for the parabolica at the last possible comfortable moment. Never just sort of do a diagonal across the track. And I just don't know whether Oscar does that or not. I can't remember. We'll have a look. And I don't know whether Lando does that. But if Lando is using his brain, he should be doing that. But if he is and Oscar isn't, he shouldn't do it until qualifying. Something else he should just keep in his pocket as well. Parabolica, difficult to see Lando being better than Oscar through the parabolica. I can't see it. So it's very small areas around Monza. Not many corners, are there, at the end of the day? Baku would be a different story. We can talk about that closer to Baku. But it's a really interesting one where, you know, one driver could think about holding an advantage and keeping it hidden a little bit. Jez James again. Peter, why are Liberty using wide-angle cameras so much and not close-up to show the real speed? Monaco swim pool is a classic case. Why wouldn't one show the cars every lap on the limit? Yeah, well, I don't know. Don't ask me about that. I suspect it's all to do with the Formula One movie and the influence of the camera angles. Not that I've seen the movie, but I'm assuming that a lot of what we're seeing now, the changes in the way we're seeing Formula One races on television or on the screen. How many people watch TV these days? I'm not sure. I mean, I'm always on an iPad or whatever. But I'm assuming that a lot of that is due to the influence of the cinematic influence of the movie and wanting to make it similar, as dramatic and as exciting. Maybe we'll have special effects coming in soon, I don't know. But I think it's that. I mean, my pet hate are those stupid onboards where the low down onboard, which is ridiculous. I mean, you really can't tell the difference. It's supposed to show how quickly the cars are going, but you can't tell the difference between 100 kilometers an hour and 300 kilometers an hour on that. I can't anyway. And you can't even see where the car is on the track, what position it's in, what steering angle they've got, nothing. It's just hopeless. How anybody thinks that's a good camera view is totally beyond me. But there are still some very good ones. I'm not massively into the helmet thing either. What's that all about? Just try and make yourself a bit sick. You don't gain anything by that. And again, that's a cinematic thing of vibration, and that's what it feels like in the cockpit. And we don't want that. We just want to see the car on board, his position on the track and what he's doing and how he's moving the wheel. And let's have some footwell cameras, please, in the new regulations. Make sure there's enough room to have lighting there and have proper footwell cameras. Won't happen, I know. But it would be brilliant, wouldn't it, to have proper foot cam alongside steering. Nicola Losa. Hi, Peter. Thanks for sharing your expertise. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Nicola. Very kind of you to say so. There are a lot of Italian drivers in Formula One back in the 80s, 90s. Alboreto, Patrese, Giacomelli, Martini, Fabi. Could you talk about them and rate them? Well, yeah, and don't forget, we should never forget Ludovico Scarfiotti, who won the Italian Grand Prix as an Italian in a Ferrari. Pretty impressive. I can't go through all of them, obviously, but I would say that in an era when gear changing is no longer an art because of the shift we have, Michele Alboreto stood out in the mechanical H-pattern gearbox era as one of the best hand-foot coordination drivers I've ever heard. His gear changing was absolutely superb, sublime, any word beginning with an S, super. The coordination was perfect, up and down shifts. It was just like a knife through butter. So that was Michele's greatest thing. Very, very soft touch as well. Lovely, lovely driver and super guy. Very, very polite, very, very humble and funny guy as well. Liked him very much. Not Rob Wilson's favourite man, because he actually gazumped Rob. When Rob was about to get a Tyrrell Formula One drive, Michele arrived with a bag of gold, and that was it. It wasn't his gold, in fairness. It was somebody else's. I think it was probably Count Zanon's. But no, lovely guy. And great shame, that we lost him so early in that sports car accident when the Audi, I think, when the bodywork came off. Terrible. But yeah, great guy. A lot of time for him. Riccardo Patrese, yeah, very good. For a long time, I mean, he was Elio De Angelis, Riccardo Patrese, Eddie Cheever, sort of were all growing up in Rome simultaneously. And for a long time, it was quite difficult to rate any difference between them. They're all really good. And even today, I find it quite difficult. I think Riccardo had a slight edge over Cheever at Alfa when they were together. And I think Elio had a little bit more finesse and touch than either of them, actually. I think Elio was probably the better of those three and very underrated still today, a bit like Clay Regazzoni. Very, very good. A bit like Michele Alboreto, actually, in the way he drove. Similar sort of look to the way he drove, similar feel. Riccardo was just a good bloke. He was a great guy. I mean, he came over from Europe to do, I think he was, 77 British Grand Prix, something like that, drove for Arrows. And I think Jackie Oliver found him wandering around Victoria Station, not knowing what to do, where to go, didn't speak a word of English. And yeah, but what a lovely guy, and just continued to get better and better, and drove some really good races. I mean, when he was with Nigel, particularly 91, he was really good in the Williams. He had a better reliability platform at that point for whatever reason, but he made the most of it, and he was good. He was very good. And again, lovely guy. He was the first person I ever saw wearing Todd's slip-on shoes, TOD''S. And he knew, is it Diego de la Vega? I think it was something like that, the founder of Todd's. And he was a big mate of Ricardo's. And Ricardo had another mate he used to bring to all the races, which was his local baker from Padova. And he'd be there a lot. And he brought some cakes with him, I think, not a lot. I don't remember that many being handed out, but he was always there. And I'm sure Ricardo spent a lot of time there. I remember once he filled in a form when I was at Williams, favourite food, and he put bread. As you would if your best mate was a baker. So yeah, Ricardo, lovely guy. Elio, Eddie Cheever was American, obviously. Bruno Giacomelli, another of my favourites. Very talented. Much better, actually, I think, than most people ever realised. Should have won a Grand Prix or two, particularly Watkins Glen in the Alpha. Very good in Formula 3. And generally not a wild Italian by any means. Very engineering orientated, very, very good at the way he went through a race weekend. Nothing crazy about Bruno. I think the fact that he spent quite a lot of his early career driving for March in Formula 3 and Formula 2 did quite a lot for his discipline, and that was a good thing for Bruno. But lovely guy, still a great guy today. I still, chat to him periodically, and he's done I think he's done an Alpha F1 car, isn't he? Flat 12, I think he's done one. And another one is Vittorio Brambilla, who I knew very well because I was good buddies with his two mechanics at March, Pete McKenzie and Dave White, and both of them great, very good mechanics, two of the best mechanics I ever knew and kind of got to know very well. And Pete ended up at Brabham, doing a great job at Brabham as well. And Dave White, actually, I think ended up selling real estate in California, doing very well. I think you can actually see his face, smiling face on one of those ads if you go to the right estate agency. Anyway, they were working for March when Vittorio was at March, the Beta Tools March. And they loved Vit. They called him Vit, and they just loved him because he didn't say much. He was super quick. And nobody ever imagined that he was that good. They couldn't understand why he was out there as quick as Hans Stuck and all the other top March drivers. And yet he was. He was always right there. And tough guy, big arms, big thighs. As I say, he didn't say very much, even in Italian, let alone in English. And tough guy. You wouldn't want to meet him on the wrong side of midnight, that's for sure. But yeah, I had a lot of time for Vittorio Brambilla. Famously won that sad 75 Austrian Grand Prix when we lost Mark Donoghue, but he won it in the wet and took his hands off the wheel as he came across the line. It was an early finish because it was so wet. As he took his hands off the wheel, he hit a puddle and crashed. But it was after the checkered flag, so he won the race. Brilliant. Just speaking of that, actually, it reminds me that Nicky was, I think he was on the pole in Austria, home Grand Prix, 75, Ferrari 312, transverse gearbox. No reason he wasn't going to win that race, but it was wet. And he and Clay, they just, I don't know if they had dry settings or what, but they were unbelievably slow in the race, finished like 7th or 8th or 6th and 7th or something. And I remember actually chatting to Mauro, just thinking about that 75 Italian Grand Prix when Nicky clinched the championship. I was chatting to Mauro on the Friday, and I said, is Enzo coming? And he said, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. But he's just been on the phone to Nicky to say, Nicky, if it looks like rain on Sunday, ring me before you decide what setup to put on the car, which I thought was quite good. Enzo with his finger on the pulse as ever. And as it happened, actually, there was a big storm on Saturday night, I recall, and everyone was a bit of a panic about whether it would be a wet race, but it wasn't. Anyway, who else did he mention there? Giancarlo Martini, yeah, he was good. Teo Fabi, very good. Corrado Fabi, very good. Both of them, rated both the Fabis very highly. They were sort of a bit subservient to Bernie and Brabham and never really, I think, really expressed themselves in the way they could as race drivers. But they were good. They were very good. Going back to Michele Alboreto, When I've told the story, I've told the story that I met Sting in the lovely hotel in Milan when we were testing at Monza in, I'm guessing it was '86, and he was in the bar after a concert, and we'd just come back from the track. What was I doing? I was running the sponsorship thing, and all the mechanics were there. Anyway, we were having a drink, and we were chatting about how the cars and what we were going to be doing tomorrow. And Sting came up and said, "Are you guys in Formula One or something?" I said, yeah. He said, "Is there a race on?" I said, no, we're just testing. He said, "Oh, wow, where are you testing?" I said, "Monza, it's very near here." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, I'd love to see that." And I said, "Oh, well, you're welcome to come out tomorrow if you want to." And I said, "We'll give you a lift to the track, no problem," knowing that we'd be leaving at like 7:30, and there's no way in the world he'd be there. And he was there in the lobby, 7:30. Anyway, he came out to the track. Anyway, bottom line is, I introduced him to Michele Alboreto, and during the lunch break, he took Sting for a lap of Monza in a 328 GTS. Sting absolutely loved it, and so did Michele, of course. "Hey, Sting, yeah, grazie." Yeah, they were the days, weren't they? Kelly J. "Hi, Peter. Promise no question about US F1. Well, that's good, because every time we do, I either lose power or lose something. You're not thrilled with the drivers for Cadillac next year. If you were choosing, who would you put in those seats?" Well, I've got to say, I'm quite impressed that they've finally hired Colton Herta as a third driver. That's a step in the right direction. And that's very good. I really rate Colton Herta. I rated his dad, Brian, who's still a good bloke and out there. And Colton did some days with Rob. That's one of the reasons I rate him very highly. And he's also very quick, isn't he? Good car control, good reflexes, just a good bloke. So hopefully, I don't know what he's going to be doing next year. Maybe some F2 as well as sim and all that stuff. But that'll be good, won't it? Wouldn't it be brilliant to see him in the car in 27? So that's good. Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of that whole boring Perez Bottas thing. Perez bringing obviously quite a lot of money from Mexico, as ever. Bottas, I guess the deal's been done by Toto in the way he got him in at Alpha, and somehow he's got him in with leverage, somehow with Merc leverage. I know they're running a Ferrari engine next year, so it's kind of, maybe there's some behind the scenes Mercedes technology going to the team, who knows. Anyway, yeah, no, I just think it's quite a boring choice. You probably could have got away with Bottas in one car, a bit more technical than Perez, but I would have put somebody young with good young F1 experience in the other car, or even somebody like Carlos Sainz, just get him out of the Williams thing and put him in that. He wouldn't go to Sauber, he wouldn't go to Audi, he went to Williams, so I guess he would never go to Cadillac, would he? So he's a non-starter. But as I said before, I rate Vesti very highly. He's very, very good short corner driver of the sort of Isaac Hadjar style, and lots of experience now with Merc behind the scenes, so he would have been good. And any number of young guys out there that have not been given the chance and whose talent has been wasted. I mean, there's so many of them that I don't want to just mention one or two. But anyway, I think rather than bang on about it, I would say good for Cadillac that they've got Colton Herta as a third driver. I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. It's good for Formula One, good for the United States, and the right thing to be doing. I wonder how it sits with the Andrettis, though, because there was a time when Michael wanted Marco to have the best possible route to success. I wonder what Marco feels about that. I don't know. I wonder what Mario thinks about it. I don't know how much role they're playing in it now. It seems odd, doesn't it? Benzi's new showdown. G'day, Peter, in chat. Hey, hi there. I mean, I think you're in Australia, Benzi's. So in which case, I don't know what time it is in Australia now, but hello there. Alpha 007. Hello, my internet Formula One friends. Hope you're all well. Hi there. Michael Lawless. Who would you like to see as next FIA boss? Well, there's a good question. I would like to see. I think Tim Mayer would do a very good job. Very good job. Ari Vatanen's probably not going to have another go at it, and probably a bit, just wouldn't want to do it now after everything had happened against Todd. Wirtz is always a guy. McNish is always another one, potentially. Derek Warwick would do a good job, actually. He probably doesn't want the stress. But of the ones that are out there, I would say Tim Mayer right now, probably. I mean, he's well versed at the way the FIA work, and I think he's a proper racer. I think he understands motor racing, and I think he's got a very well-rounded approach to business and life as well. And don't know him that well, but know him reasonably well. So I think he would be good. Alex Wirtz would be another for sure. I mean, he's a great guy. He's done so much work recently on circuit design and circuit safety, and he's eloquent, he's personable, he's liked, and his heart's in the right place. So it'd be difficult to go wrong with Alex. Super chat from Zeem. Thank you very much, Zeem. Hey, Peter, you often say Lewis should get back to short corners, but what about braking? Others have adopted to these heavy cars by braking earlier, while Lewis still brakes as late as ever. Yeah, it's I mean, braking is a little bit of a misunderstood art these days, I think, particularly if you compare Max with, say, Tsunoda. Bear in mind they're braking to different points, and so when they actually start their heavy braking isn't really relevant, because Tsunoda's braking to a point on the outside of the corner. Max is braking to a point probably earlier than Tsunoda, but he's starting his braking with steering lock on the car, virtually flat still, and he's just starting to touch the brakes. He's extending the straight. So you can't really compare them. Lewis, to my understanding, has always been very, very good under brakes, by which I mean if you had two identical cars going into the same corner, Lewis will be the one that will find the perfect cadence of pedal pressure against the ride of the car and the feel of the surface of the road, whereas another driver might just brake like that just because it's the braking point. He wants to brake really late. Lewis will always modulate fractionally and get it absolutely right, and he's very good at that. And that's why sometimes he can brake really late, because he's getting so much more out of the tires. And I think he's probably still got that. I think the problem is, I think he's confused without knowing it, whether he should be braking in a straight line, whether he should be braking as he's turning in against throttle, and how much does he need to come out of the brake pedal pressure once he's getting down to the transition point, the rotation point. So it's not just about heavy braking, it's also about warning the car. It's warning the car before you actually do brake heavily. And Lewis, I'm sure, still does that very well. I can't imagine he doesn't. Even on the Brembo brakes, no question he would be doing that. As Leclerc does, for sure. Leclerc's very good in that area. So, yeah. It's, I think to be that pinpointed about Lewis's thing is to take one aspect of it that isn't actually going to change anything. It may confuse it for him, but it wouldn't actually change anything or improve anything. He's got to have, it's all about a feel for the front of the car and knowing how much he can get towards the rotation point with load on the car while he's braking. And that's what he used to do so well in the McLaren and in the Mercedes prior to 21. And it's what Charles does when he's got the car more or less drivable. And that's what it's all about. And when you're doing that, very naturally, you'll be braking relatively late, in compared with your teammate, not in terms of unsettling the car. Lewis has never been a driver that unsettles the car under braking any more than Max is or Charles is. Thanks for that question. Very good one. Michael Lawless, do you think Red Bull would be in a totally different position if Newey was still there, or just point of diminishing returns and other teams have caught up? I think they would be better off if Newey was still there, definitely. I think Aston Martin the car's better now than it was, and that, for sure that's something to do with Adrian. I know it's not his Aston, but he will have had a bit of input. And on the occasions where Red Bull are right now, the amount of downforce, efficient downforce they lack, I think Adrian would have got on top of a lot of that. Yes, I do think Red Bull would be in a different position. More importantly, because he was always going to leave Red Bull, I think Ferrari would be in a much better position. And Ferrari could have got him. He was very near to going to Ferrari. And they either dropped the ball, and they just focused on getting Lewis and didn't get Adrian. And big mistake. Big mistake. And I think for sure Ferrari would be a much better team now if Adrian was there. Benzi's news showdown. Now a question. Hey Peter, glad we're back into race weeks. Do you have any stories about Paddy McNally, racer, Autosport Journo, Formula One triumvirate, member with Bernie and Max? Well, we did have this question last time. I didn't actually get on that well with Paddy later in life. I found him quite difficult. I don't want to go into details. All I would say was that he was a very, very good journalist in his Autosport days. And we're going back to late 60s, early 70s, very early 70s. And detail, particularly his big thing was endurance racing. But he also did some good track tests of, Lotus Cortinas with big engines and stuff like that. I don't have any experience for how actually any good, if he was any good as a driver, but he certainly was a real beaver, eager beaver, we used to call any journalist that would be there long after the practice session was over, getting engine details, gearbox ratio details. McNally was one of those, and his attention to detail and his journalistic stuff was very, very good. So yeah, he was very much a part of the early Bernie thing, when Bernie started to go to controlling TV rights, controlling the media passes, controlling the Paddock Club, all that stuff. Paddy was very much in the forefront of that, as was Max, of course. Michael Delosso, why is nobody talking about Fornaroli? He's on for the F3, F2 double. Much more impressive record than many current rookies. Yeah, he is. Yeah. Not that we don't rate him, just he's very good. Don't know, really. Can't say any more than that. I'll watch him this weekend. There you go. Make sure we all pay attention. Now you know. Hi, Peter. Love and absolute respect from India. Thank you very much. Colton Herta announced as Caddy reserve driver. He's leaving Indy. Yeah, well, it's a step up, isn't it? If you got a chance in F1, you take it, man. You don't even think twice about it. And good for Colton. Good for Cadillac for giving him that opportunity. That's really good. So there we go. So another comment from Benzie about Paddy McNally. Yeah, I remember being in Tramp one night, the nightclub in London, and McNally and Fergie were there. And the standard of the jokes was not appropriate. Is that the right word? For people of their stature. That's all I'll say. Orkan Stas. Peter, I know there's been talk of the 26 cars having lower lap times. Do you think the cars will eventually be faster once the teams improve, or are they intrinsically going to be overall slower? Well, they'll be faster eventually than the cars we have, but they won't be faster than the cars we have if we continue to develop the cars we have, if you see what I mean. So, yeah, they'll put all sorts of stuff all over them, the push to pass and the active aero, and they'll pinch and squeal with the engines, and they'll be obsessed with lap time and top speed, none of which for me is relevant or important, but they will, and we'll probably have even more artificial aids on the car to make them go quicker, which I think is a huge mistake. What we really need is lighter, smaller Formula One cars with much more affordable engines, more reliable, making more noise. Dare I say, normally aspirated power units. Jack, my son, was telling me tonight that I can't believe this is true, but apparently Porsche now, you can't, in the future, not going to buy a Boxster or a Cayman with a normally aspirated engine. I just can't believe it. From Porsche, it's all electric. I don't know, what can you say? Not very much, really. Depressing. Benzi's news showdown. Ferrari's Niki Lauda 75 tribute is so cool. The days of mechanical grip and power. Yeah, absolutely. And, the days when you did something like a transverse gearbox and you got a reward for it, you wouldn't even be allowed to do it today. It's all templated. Which brings me back to my point. The rule book basically defines the mechanical layout of a Grand Prix car these days. Yes, you can move the batteries and intercoolers and things like that a little bit, but generally speaking, engine, gearbox, wheels, brakes, everything is defined by the regs. Same tires for everybody, and it's all just aero. Very sad. Musa Nguni. Hi Peter, at what point do you feel that a Formula One driver should consider retiring? Well, I'm actually adding a little bit of here, a bit of artistic license. But when AJ Foyt, driving a journalist around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in a road car, was asked that question, he said, when your peripheral vision starts to go, at which point he grabbed a fly on the left in his palm of his hand and threw it out the window. Peripheral vision, definitely the first thing. How you'd monitor that, don't know. I mean, a lot of drivers, I think, don't want to know about their eyesight not getting any better, maybe getting a little bit worse. I remember Gilles doing a lot of eye exercises in the beginning of '82 with an orange hanging on a piece of string, you know, sort of this sort of stuff, eye muscle stuff. And yeah, peripheral vision is the first thing. And I think that should stay with you well into your 40s. I'm not saying that's, you know, an early thing. And there's no reason why in your 40s you can't be fit enough to drive a Grand Prix car. For sure you can. Vis-a-vis, you know, look at Fernando Alonso. So it'll be peripheral vision. And as I say, that may creep up on you. It may be, I mean, I always felt that Michael's peripheral was maybe going a little bit when he had that last year at Merck and that shunt at Singapore he had. It looked to me a little bit like not being quite aware of everything that was going on around him at that time on that specific moment. But easy for me to say that. I mean, Sterling Moss' peripheral vision was still perfect when he tried to come back after his accident in '62. He just felt it was his concentration that had gone. That was a different thing. And obviously, if your concentration goes, your ability to focus and concentrate goes, that's something else. But it's not a good thing at all. But if everything else is basically under control, physically the first thing that will go, I think, will be your peripheral vision. Michael Lawless, how does Kimi Antonelli have such a Peter Windsor-like knowledge of Formula One history? Have you been tutoring him? Does he? I don't know. That's good. I'm sure he knows more than I do. He should do. He's a Formula One driver. But, wow, that's good to hear. A Formula One driver that actually cares about the past and about history being important, because if we don't learn from history, how can we move forward? And, you know, how Niki Lauda ran his 75 season is relevant to how Oscar Piastri could take it for the rest of this year, for example. I'm not saying he should arrive on a Benelli motorbike, but you know, it wouldn't hurt to see how Niki did that, for example. That would be good. Actually, more appropriate would be Niki in '84, wouldn't it, when he had that very close battle with Prost and beat him by half a point. That would be one to do. But yeah, I think it's always sad when some drivers even think it's funny when they're asked a question about something to do with the past and they say, oh, I wasn't even born then. And they think it's really funny to say that. I mean, that reply's been given so many times that it's actually not very funny anymore. It's actually quite stupid, I think, because it basically is saying, I don't really care about anything that happened in the world until I was born, which is just so ignorant as to be absurd. And then beyond that, just to say I don't care is the other thing. And that's a sort of bit of a Michael Schumacher thing. I think Michael started all of that, really. I mean, Mario loved talking about Alberto Ascari. Ayrton Senna respected Jim Clark. Carlos Reutemann respected Juan Manuel Fangio, as he would. But when Michael was around, he didn't really want to know about stats. Maybe it was a superstitious thing. He didn't want to know about his own stats, and therefore he didn't ever want to be compared with anybody prior to Michael. So in giving Michael a benefit of the doubt, it could well have been something along those lines. But Michael had a sort of absolutely rigid approach to questions re the past, and it would be, I've no idea. And it would basically be, I don't care. And there are quite a lot of drivers today, I think, who probably have that attitude. And I've always felt that it was very odd that if you take a sport like golf, and I guess it's because in golf, ultimately you're playing the course rather than another human being. So it's not quite as head on as, say, motor racing. But there is a similarity. It's not like boxing or even tennis. They're in a car, and it's the car they have to respect. So there's really no excuse. I mean, I was going to say in golf, and if you asked a lot of the young rookies on the tour today about some of the great players from the past, they would all know. You know, if you asked Ricky Fowler what colour umbrella Arnold Palmer had, even when the sun was shining, he would know. You know, and Bobby Jones, they would know what years he was winning and what tournaments he won. And because there's respect from the past, from the present. But there isn't that in motor racing. I blame Bernie ultimately, because Bernie had this thing about, you know, the more we talk about the history of Formula One, the more it detracts from what we're doing at the moment. We've got to have 100% focus on Formula One right now. That's how we're going to make the most money. Kill Formula 2, kill Formula 3, kill sports cars, kill national racing, kill the journalists, don't have any passes unless we want them to have, unless we decide who's going to get a pass. We control everything, focus on our thing, and that was it. And so as a result, a lot of the next generation, or that whole generation in the 80s, onwards, never really had any knowledge of Formula One, and it used to break my heart. You know, I knew Dan Gurney very well, not when he was driving, but later on in life. And even though he was related to Norbert Haug by marriage, and even though he was Dan Gurney, he never once got an invitation to go to a Grand Prix, not once. And so he didn't go to many. He occasionally went when friends were going and he had a pass or something through friends, but he would never obviously beg for a pass. And that's completely wrong. Completely wrong. I mean, Phil Hill used to be right on the edge of Formula One, working for Grand Prix Tours, doing talks and so forth, and would be there. But he wasn't given the acclaim that he should have been given as Phil Hill, 61 world champion, any more than Dan Gurney was given the acclaim that he should have got. And Sterling Moss the same. You know, when I came over from England in the early 70s, Sterling was about to race in British touring cars in an Audi and do some stuff there. Well, I'm not sure it was then. I mean, he was doing some other stuff, but he then went on to do the British touring car. And nobody really talked about Sterling Moss. They just said, oh yeah, I was Sterling, you know, a bit of a joke. And nobody really, I'm talking Formula One people now, nobody thought, oh wow, Sterling Moss. It was all, yeah, Sterling Moss, who cares? And that's the way it was. So sad. And I'm very pleased to hear that Kimi Antonelli, I think Sebastian Vettel has a bit of feel as well for the past. I'm sure quite a lot of drivers today think, when I retire, I'll start to take an interest and I'll put my career in context of everybody else's, and that'll be a lot of fun. I don't want to take any attention from my job right now. It's probably how a lot of them think. But I do think that Formula One needs to do a lot more to respect its past and to bring to life its heroes from the past, and could do so much more. Absolutely. Benzie again. Did anyone here see Mr. Domenicali's proposal for lots of reverse grid, shorter Formula One races, ditching practice sessions and tons of sprint races, all because he says free highlights, viewers? No, I didn't. I don't want to see that. Might give me a stomachache if I see that. Let's hope none of that ever happens. I can't believe Stefano would do that. He's a racer. He's a good bloke, Stefano. Why would he suggest any of that rubbish? Selecki, quoted out of context for sure. Selecki, if Nicky was there today, then what would he say to Lewis given current circumstances? Yeah. Let me think about that one. No, he'd tell Nick. I think pretty sure he'd tell Lewis to retire and go and start an airline or something, or a movie company, or do something else. Worked for me. I came back and then won again, Lewis. Time you did the same thing. You know, Nicky went to Ferrari as a consultant. I'm trying to remember when it was, but he didn't do a very good job. And his main thing was to sort of rehire Barnard again at a time when Barnard wasn't doing a very good job either, and it never really worked out. So I'm not sure Nicky would be the best person to give Lewis advice, except that I think you could say if Nicky was in Lewis's situation now, I think he'd probably peg it in, as John Surtees would say, at the end of the year. Malcolm Collett, Hi Peter, do you have any specific memories of Joe Siffert? I was fortunate to see him race in 70 and 71, and sadly I was at Brands on the tragic day in October 71. Ah, what a sad thing. Yeah, when he lost it going into Hawthorne and hit the bank and the car exploded and fire, and we'd lost Pedro Rodriguez only a few months before, so both BRM drivers lost their lives that year, and very, very sad. And Seppi, I only saw him drive once, which was the 67 Monaco Grand Prix when I was about 9. And I've got a picture of him coming through the chicane where I was watching on Saturday with no, I haven't actually. I've got a picture of his car, the Rob Walker Cooper Maserati, but it's being driven by Tony Robinson, I think, or one of the mechanics anyway, not by Seppi. So I don't think I actually ever saw Seppi. I saw the race on Sunday, and I don't think he had a great race. That was about it. So I don't have any memories of him as such, other than that I was very pleased to meet his son at Olavilla a couple of years ago, and he'd just built a beautiful Gulf Porsche 917 replica with a proper Porsche flat, engine, and he was a lovely guy, and I was wearing a Seppi Siffert polo shirt, so he was quite impressed, I think. I was a big fan of Seppi, very, very oversteery. One of the great photographs of all time was taken by Peter Byrne, the English photographer for Autosport. 68 Monaco Grand Prix, coming into Casino Square in the Rob Walker Lotus 49. I don't know how much opposite lock. I think it was almost full opposite lock coming into Casino Square through the left-hander, and he's just like that, inside wheels off the ground. Amazing. I've heard a few stories from Brian Redman about how they never won Le Mans because whereas Brian would accelerate the 908 Longtail past the pits going bom, 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 looking after the gearbox, Seppi would be bom, bom, bom. He couldn't hold himself back. But that win at the 68 British Grand Prix, wow, what a win. Rob Walker, Lotus 49. Jackie Oliver could have won that race, should have won that race. He was really quick. Graham Hill too. Big day for Lotus. Detro 0861. Benzi's News Showdown. I was just going back to Seppi. One of the reasons I never saw Seppi drive is because he never did the Tasman series. And so I saw a lot of really good guys when I was a kid out in Australia. They all, most of them came out, but not Seppi. Just never had a drive, I suppose. Benzi, hi Peter, what will be your reaction if Oscar takes a 25 drivers title well before the end of the season? I know it might be tough for some here. Wouldn't worry me. I would be just as happy for him as I would be if he took it at the end of the year. And, it'd be a great win, wouldn't it? And why wouldn't I be delighted for him? I would be. I think what you're saying is we all want the championship to go to the last race and we want everything to be as dramatic as possible. I'm not one of those guys. I grew up in an era when Jim Clark was winning a lot of races, and I used to love it when he led from start to finish and win by a lap from the pole. And I still feel the same today when guys do that. And, I feel like, well, that's what they deserved and good stuff. And I love overtaking if it's great overtaking. I love defense if it's great defense. I don't like anything artificial. And also I grew up in the era of Dennis Jenkinson writing for Motorsport, Continental Notes, Letter from Europe, and most of the Grand Prix reports. And Jenks always made it clear that his opinion was that the point-scoring World Championship system actually ruins Formula One because it detracts sometimes from the race. And Sterling Moss was an example of a driver who just wanted to win every race, didn't really care about the championship. That seems very odd today. You'd never ever think that way, but it's kind of in my DNA a little bit. I don't really care that much about the championship, only because some great drivers never won the championship. And so I think, well, it doesn't make them any less great than they were. Chris Amon never won a race, a championship race. He won non-championship races, but people don't remember those. But Chris was as quick and as good as virtually anybody that's ever sat in a race car. But he never even won a race. And Sterling never won a championship. Carlos Reutemann never won a championship. But I don't feel any the less about him and his ability because of that. So if Oscar wins it well before the last race, good luck to him. You know, he's got a chance of doing that, isn't he? After Zandvoort. Another one from Benzie. Lots from you, mate. Showdown. Everyone kindly. That like button. Well, that's a very nice comment. Thank you very much. Matt G. Hi, Peter. Could you show us short corners versus long ones using old Formula One footage? I'd love for you to help us learn with actual video that is not copyrighted. Thank you for your videos. Yeah, it's quite difficult to find video these days. It is rights free, but I'll have a go at that. I was watching the 58 Albert Park Formula One race the other day, and in Sterling Moss in Rob Walker's rear engine Cooper, and he's got the rear engine cover off. Car looks a bit odd because of it had a porous radiator, I think, and the heat, there was too much temperature, and so they took the bodywork off and he won the race. But even in that, you can see Sterling using little bits of road going into the corner compared with Black Jack Brabham. You can just see the difference there between Sterling and Jack going into a couple of the corners in that black and white footage from Albert Park. And so, yeah, you can definitely. So the question is to find the footage. So I'll have a go at that. See what I can do. Benzie's talking to Michael Lawless now. Great question. Makes us wonder, has Adrian Newey had any impact on the team this year since Aston Martin seem to be going well now? Well, yeah. It's a better car now, the Aston. And I'm not sure the Red Bull's a better car than it was. Is it? Probably not. Sad, isn't it? It's going to make one tweak. See if this works now. 1 second. Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, one tweak to the lighting, because I don't have perfect lighting here. As you can tell, when the sun goes down, things change a little bit. But I think that's all right, isn't it? The other day, I was terrible. It was my first one back from being a bit ill, and the lighting. Oh, one of the lights had failed. That was the other problem. So, Lando, blah blah blah. Dodgem says Lando's not boring. His emotions just completely under control. Oscar Plata says DRS has had many regulation patches, good word, that have appeared since '97. Was supposed to be a temporary solution. Right now we're getting in the way of allowing true racing on track. In the latest edition of Formula One, in which the cars inherently are supposed to be easier for overtaking. So why do we even need DRS? And the good news about Monza is because it's a low downforce circuit, the effect of DRS is slightly less than it is on a high downforce circuit. But there will still be DRS, you know. Yeah, there we go. Not quite sure what this is all about. True. The Alan Prost compliments and Oscar's reaction were really wholesome. Yeah, I think I know what that's about. I think that's what I was talking about, was it, or not? So, what do we think? Dodgem says, Aussies claim Liam too. Really? We'll always support him. Oh, well. Yeah, well, he's from the Antipodes, isn't he? Benzie's News Showdown. Denny Hulme was such a character. Well, he was. Denny was a good bloke. A bit of a tough, grisly old bear sometimes. I remember I'd be chatting to him sometimes in the paddock, and a little boy would come up and ask for his autograph, and he'd just sort of, no, not now, come back later. Yeah. But he was generally very cool. Denny was a lovely guy and very good racing driver. I went to his house once at Walton on Thames in Surrey, very upmarket, what they call the stockbroker belt. Not sure that Denny saw it that way. He just saw it as, well, you know, it's fairly near the McLaren factory or this or that in Brabham. But he'd built this house. He designed it himself. It was a sort of modern, late 60s, quite rectangular thing with a lot of glass. Really nice, on an elevated plot of land. And I was in there. I was interviewing him about something. I got him to sign my automobile year, which was nice, from 67. But he showed me the fittings he had for his overhead lights in the living room, which were hanging down on throttle and brake cables, would you believe, and mounted in McLaren M8D ventilated brake discs, just flush to the ceiling. Unbelievable. It was so cool. Oh yeah, and all the framing for the windows was all Reynolds Aluminium, which was the company that sponsored McLaren in the Can-Am. Wow. There we go. So Oscar Plata, Lando's in a difficult position to try to cut down the distance. A driver has shown very little inclination to mistakes and fully capable of winning everything from now on. Yeah, you know, it's all Oscar's got to do in reality is just finish second behind Lando for a few races now, isn't he? He's still going to be home and dry. But Oscar won't do that. He won't fall into the trap of not trying to win every race. Obviously there'll be a moment when he may not win the race and it's gone Lando's way, in which case he'll just do what he has to do. But he'll go into every race wanting to win it for sure. I'd be shocked if Oscar doesn't have that approach. So Eric van der Winden says, Max hates it when he's being talked to during cornering. He needs to hear the revs, as do I, in the sim, by the way. Yep, very good point. Charles Swanberg says, I'm a huge Kimi Räikkönen fan and miss him on the grid along with his personality and driving skills. Considering he was the last Ferrari Formula One champion, do you think he was a short corner driver? Yeah, absolutely he was. And he combined not only that brilliance into the corner and the softness of touch that you need, but he also had incredible feel for the exit of the corner as well. He was just like, for that, there was about a 2-year period at McLaren when he was just brilliant, sublime. But then he kind of went off the boil a bit and lost focus and didn't work as hard at it. And, you know, it went away. But for a very short period of time, he was just as good as it gets, Kimi Räikkönen. I wonder if Kimi Antonelli is a big Kimi Räikkönen fan. Interesting. The whole Italian thing of calling your son after cool drivers. Because Jarno Trulli was named after Jarno Saarinen, wasn't he? The Finnish motorcycle star who sadly was killed, I think at Monza actually, maybe wrong. And obviously I guess Kimi Antonelli is named after Kimi Räikkönen, is he not? So another super chat here, just grab that one. Where was that? A blue one. Where's that gone? Here it is. From Chris Giri, Alonso losing to Stroll this year, thoughts on why? Is he? He didn't look behind Stroll. I would say he's been ahead of him a lot of the time. Stroll has his moments, but I don't think what you saw in the race was Stroll out driving Fernando Alonso. I think it was just Fernando lost a massive amount of time mid-race, did he not, with the short second stint they gave him, and he's in traffic, and I think Stroll got the break there. Hard to say. I mean, doesn't mean much, does it? But in terms of the quality of Alonso versus the quality of Stroll, I think we saw that in not only on qualifying, Friday and Saturday. Stroll puts a difficult car in the wall. Alonso qualifies into Q3. End of story. Ashish Anand, no, haven't watched the Formula One movie. If yes, any views? No. Watched Grand Prix many times. Love Grand Prix, but not this one. Haven't seen it yet. I just haven't got round to it. Too busy reading and watching other stuff. Big Al Nowitzki. Hi Peter, not sure if you've answered this before. What do you think of a reverse grid weekend? I presume you're referring to touring cars or something like that, are you? No, he says laughing. That's my answer. I cannot believe that anybody would think that this is appropriate for Grand Prix racing, for Formula One. It's bad enough in Formula 2 and Formula 3, but to bring it in to Formula One, I think would be an absolute travesty. And I hope I never get to see that. Never. I think it's an appalling idea. Franz Herman, agree. Lando came out swinging and Oscar just observed and backed himself to be fast when it counted. Yep. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to have to end this fairly soon, guys. Second live stream, and I've got quite a lot of stuff going on this weekend as well. Just going to do another mod to this, see how it goes. Where are we? Brightness. It's just making it darker in the background. Make me less contrasty, maybe. More contrasty. Yeah, I'm just playing around with some lighting. Not really working as exposure. Oh, maybe that's better, and then go darker. Darker with brightness. And maybe that's a bit better. I don't know. You guys tell me. It's not bad, is it? That's not bad. Could be better. So yeah, just a couple more. Where are we? Here we go. No, we're not. Yes, we are. I can't find my question box now. Where is it? Here we go. Good. Hill Arimba. Hello, Windsor. Kindly share with us the McLaren Ferrari $100 million saga and how McLaren could have collapsed except for Bernie's intervention. Bernie started it all. How did Bernie save it? The $100 million fine was Bernie's idea in the first place with Max. No, I think it was completely and utterly over the top. Not the first time things like that have happened. Arrow, Shadow, Ferrari, Benetton, and you know, in the Barnard era. And then we had this thing, which was, I mean, in my opinion, Bernie and Max had always wanted to get Ron somehow. They didn't like Ron. They never did like Ron, and they never liked his success. And so that was the main thing. It was a personal thing. And then I'm sure they were fairly ambivalent about Lewis coming in as well. And so when there was an opportunity to do something like punish McLaren for some sort of theft, they took the opportunity with open arms and went to $100 million, which is crazy. The reality is that it was triggered by Nigel Stepney, one of the Benetton mechanics that Michael took from Benetton to Ferrari and was an integral part of Michael's success at the Ferrari team. And when the whole team kind of started to fall apart, not fall apart, but they went their own ways, and it was kind of the end of an era. Everybody went to a different job and a nice position, except for Nigel Stepney, who kind of got quite bitter, I think, that he wasn't given any sort of promotion and was a bit taken for granted. And so he then decided that he would do some underhand stuff with the Ferrari drawings and pass them on. So actually it was Ferrari that started it all, not McLaren. And McLaren received them. Yes, they didn't immediately go to the FIA and say this has happened. And there was some skullduggery from McLaren's side as well. But the trigger was from Ferrari's side. And very sadly, Nigel then committed suicide, not that long afterwards. And so the whole thing was very, very bad. And I've never, ever, I certainly don't think Bernie saved McLaren, that's for sure. And I certainly think that it was massively over the top. And I'm still amazed that Ron Dennis actually was able to accept it the way he did and to carry on the way he did and to go on and to win the world championship the way he did. And that was, that was one of his greatest things, I think, in my opinion. This is another super chat. Howdy, Peter. This is from Langrelan Density. Hey, good to have you back. Thank you very much. Thoughts on World Rally Championship Paraguay? Certainly happy to see some red clay on the calendar. Yeah, a little bit like the old Australian rally, New Zealand rallies we used to have as well. Yeah, we talked about that. I talked about that in the live stream yesterday. Incredible win for Sébastien Ogier, given that he had that puncture and lost so much time with that puncture on the first day. And he was behind both Terry Neuville and Elfyn Evans. way behind after the first day, and yet he finished ahead of both of them. And that's the order in which they finished. Incredible drive by Ogier. Hyundai seemed to have lots of weird things going on. From the windscreen wipers kept flicking up on Tanak's car, dampers breaking, tyres laminating, and in the end, through it all, Adrian Foremost should have been comfortably second and had a damper go at the wrong moment, and B, caught the rain in the Wolf power stage right at the end, didn't he? Very unlucky, and finished fourth and elevating Terry to third, who had a very poor rally really from Terry Neville's by his standards. But he had a couple of broken dampers. He had this lamination which effectively made him leave the road and lost him a lot of time. Not as much as Ogier though, got to say. And so quite a messy rally all round, apart from Ogier's drive. But great to see the... I thought it looked a little bit like Portugal as well. Take away the red clay, the actual geography and the trees and everything, a little bit like Portugal as well. And they go to Chile, not this weekend, but the following weekend. So I think quite a lot of them are staying out there, going to Machu Picchu and places like that. Good. Thanks for that. Dodgem F1. Reverse grids reward mediocrity and unfair under a cost cap. Yeah, totally ridiculous. It's just juvenile. I mean, it's just juvenile. Why would you want to have reverse grids? It just demeans Formula One, really. Chris Giri. We'll make this the last one. Peter, any view on which Formula One race to go to as a first time? My dad has been a long-term Formula One fan. He's now 71. I would like to go to a race with him, considering Silverstone. Yeah, Silverstone's very flat, so it's okay. It's a great atmosphere, lots of people, quite difficult to get around. The crowds in and out are difficult, and quite difficult from a spectator point of view. Actually, I wouldn't have said it's the best circuit from a spectator point of view, but if you want to go to Silverstone, yeah, I mean you won't be disappointed. It'll be what it is, the big event, the British Grand Prix. Formula One race to go, depends where you're going from and how far you want to go, I guess. But Monaco is always a good one to go to. You see the cars for longer. There's some great vantage points if you get a nice grandstand. I'm on the outside of Tabac, going into the swimming pool. Great grandstand at Casino Square as well, going down the hill, coming into Casino Square and then down the hill. And I've never watched from the back of Portier, the little stand they have there, but I imagine that's pretty good as well. So Monaco would definitely be one. Hungary, another. Very good vantage points in Hungary. You can see a lot of the track from Hungary. Austin, too. Very good vantage points everywhere. Not quite the same as Hungary in terms of corners, and it's just a bit too much runoff area in Austin, I think is what I was going to say. It's not a bad circuit in terms of some quick corners, but it's a shame that some of them don't have long straights afterwards, and it's just the corner and then they're braking hard, which is always a bit disappointing, frustrating. Where else? Baku, I'm sure. I've never been to Baku, but I'm sure it's pretty good. Get in there and get any street circuit is going to be fine. Singapore no, I wouldn't go to Singapore actually. It's so hot and sweaty and probably quite difficult to get decent vantage point there. Where else? Brazil would be the other one. Brazil and Japan. Can't go wrong in either place. Very good circuits and lots of good positions for the spectators. So just finishing with Prophet Teth. The F1 movie is so bad, it's good. Well, I think that says it all, doesn't it? I wish it didn't say it all, actually, because, we want Formula One to be good. We want Formula One to be what it should be, and it should have its roots in the past, and we shouldn't have any of this artificial stuff. None of it. It's bad enough putting up with all the, I shouldn't say bad enough, but we're putting up with all the electrification and all this stuff. And that's our doffing our hat to the future. Let's not add all these other ridiculous things like reverse grids and active aero and push to pass. It's all so childish. Anyway, that's me. Got that off my chest. Now we can have a nice Italian Grand Prix, and I'll be back with the normal 3 videos, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, to TrackNinja, and of course to you, the fans, for and OEM Exclusive, I should add, all of whom support this channel and wouldn't have the channel the way it is. And a big thanks to you for your questions and comments as ever. Take care, and